sorry for being late. I was waylaid by the good people of Hammers.
Oh, you're fine. Maddie, kill the music.
Hi,
All right.
Matt.
Oh, Maddie says hello. All right, so we are. Let me do some rearranging here. Are you ready to talk about the history of Western music? What is this? You got a great topic.
The history. Well, Western music. I was thinking about it's Western music and like ways of listening to music of different cultures, and also weird Renaissance instruments because I know them. I know a
Perfect.
lot of them.
All right, take it away.
All right. So I put this down because I did a lot of sound study stuff in college that I haven't really, and like music theory and shit that I haven't really used. But then my friend was telling me about um, an experience they had doing like social media, like recording and broadcasting a bluegrass show. And they
Oh.
were like, yeah, like it was amplified, like it was all amplified, and all of the instruments of bluegrass, which are like the banjo, like the steel string guitar, like the fiddle, they have a very, and you probably know this because you're like a sound type person, they have a very narrow, well, they have a very narrow range. They're
Right.
all very high and they're all very tinny. And so, except for the bass, which bluegrass you can have like upright bass, whatever. This isn't about bluegrass. This is about listening to different kinds of music in different kinds of contexts. But my friend was like, this bluegrass festival that I recorded sounded like garbage, and all I could hear was like this sort of tinny like wall of sound from all these like high range instruments, and then like the bass just going like do 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 do. And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, dude, like the context in which you are listening to the bluegrass music amplified at a festival, probably like in a huge field, open air, with like bajillions of people through digital instruments, is like totally not the context in which bluegrass music came from. Yeah. And the same goes for like Balkan music and Roma music. And okay, people clown on bagpipes all the time for
Oh,
somewhat similar reasons. Like they're really
there's a bunch of
high.
jerks out here clowning on
I
bagpipes.
know. I know. People are like, bagpipes suck, and I'm here to tell you why bagpipes don't suck. Bagpipes do not suck. Well, okay, bagpipes suck if you are playing them in the wrong context. And I don't mean sort of like atmospheric or like event context. I mean more like, mm, so people play bagpipes at weddings, right? Which is a sort of similar situation. Like you have an open field, you have like a fuck ton of people milling about. The bagpipe is a really incredibly powerful instrument and sounds quite similar actually to a really ancient Celtic instrument called the carnix,
Oh.
which is a huge horn that is like bigger than you or I, that is held, it's sort of like, it's almost like an S shape, and they have these like incredible reconstructions of, they're like pig faces. But anyway, so in the olden times, this is my theory about where like the sound of the bagpipes come from. In the olden times, when the Romans were like invading, they were trying to annex, Hibernia, I think, Rome called Ireland and Scotland and stuff.
Hi, Bernie.
Right, the Celts were like, fuck man, like this is not cool, we are being colonized. And so they would bring out the carnix, and now the carnix, and later the bagpipe, and also the tin whistle, instruments of the Emerald Isle, are all incredibly well designed instruments for making yourself heard in like the forests, through mist, in an environment where there's all this like spongy like organic material, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those are like, and they're not being played inside like a small space. So if you're listening to shit like bluegrass or Balkan music or Roma music or like, or bagpipes or fucking any of these, and it sounds like dog shit, I urge you, specifically you, Liz, and also the good people, to consider like what is the context. All of these instruments come from like, they're meant to be played outside, and they're meant to be played in places where there's not a lot of like hard surfaces for sound to bounce off of, right?
Yeah.
So in contrast to that, in direct contrast to that, so Western music, right? Western notation, plain chant, early Gregorian music, we've all heard, like we all know what that sounds like.
Yeah.
um, that kind of music and a lot of chant music, I believe a lot of chant music just generally, but like I'm sort of specifically coming from like I'm like, oh, Gregorian, like I can talk about that because that's what I know about. That was the kind of music that was being sung in like first caves, and then when people were building churches, they were singing it in churches.
Big
So
places. Hollow.
yeah, huge places. Yeah, lots of really like really echoey, really resonant. Yeah, caves basically, or sorry, I mean churches basically emulate caves. Like if you think about that, and like you think about sort of where we've been finding, um, like artifacts and like bones from like really early humans, and like sort of places that people are speculating like, oh, this was a sacred space, this was a sacred cave. It's all cave. It's all cave. Um, oh, I hear.
Fuck yeah. It's all
I hear traffic.
caves. Oh,
It's
sorry.
all cake.
It's a very
Yeah.
sensitive
Oh, no
microphone.
worries.
Speaking of sonic studies. But yeah, so all of this early music, churches are based on caves. I love that. That's good to know
Yeah.
as a theory.
How am I doing? How am I on? Oh, we've got time.
Yeah,
Okay,
you're
great.
doing great. You've got
Um,
like 6 more minutes.
Great. Yeah. So the cool thing about Gregorian music is that like, mm, and plain chant, and then what the hell is it called? Like square notation, early forms of notation, like very early systems of Western music that have their roots in chant music are generally they have a sort of narrow range. Again, we're back with like the narrow range, but they have a more like there's a more fleshed out like delineation of parts. So you have like a high part, you have your middle part, and you have like your bass like deep voice part,
Mhm.
and all of that, and the way that people were writing it and the way that people were composing, it was all meant to sound really really good in these huge spaces where there was not a lot of like control over like what was happening acoustically. So these spaces were just like huge resonant, they were designed to be, and they were like huge beautiful resonant chambers for the human voice. And that's sort of that context, when people were singing and sort of, oh, like Miserere by like Grigori, like what's his name, Gregorini Allegri, I think his name is. All like that beautiful choral music came about because like people have not always been professional singers, but it's pretty easy to make your voice sound really beautiful, like in a huge echoey space like that. Um, and it's also pretty easy to like to take that as like a basis and then be like, okay, now we can sort of, you can write music that is readable to like the common folk, people who are not professional musicians, and have it sound really fucking good with just like those three parts in this huge, big resonant space. Um, I implore you all to consider what playing a bagpipe like at the bottom of a canyon, like in Arizona, would sound like.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it would sound bad, but somebody like singing there, that'd sound pretty cool. Um,
Did you watch any of the? Because we had my friend June came on and talked about sound sculptures built specifically for,
what?
you know, interesting acoustic technology.
Oh my god! So you've already been hearing about this. I'm so sad that I missed that. Is
Oh,
there a
it's
recording of it?
yeah. It'll all be up. I'll send it to you. But I feel like that's what a great thread to go through this show. This is sort of sound studies stuff.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Wow. Um.
Cool.
Wow. That's so sick. Yeah. It
Do you,
also makes me think about how like when you try and record, like basically like a lot of the microphones that we use right now in like now times sort of have similar limitations for like what they're trying to record, because like the microphone, I have like $100 Chromebook right now that I'm speaking to you on, and I know it has a shitty microphone. But this shitty microphone, as with like most of the sort of microphones that are available for consumer use, are only like they are designed to pick up the sort of narrow range high frequencies of the human voice. And so if I went and like if I try and record my cello on something like that, I haven't found a microphone that can satisfactorily record my any of my cello music. But especially not ones that are sort of like that are like, oh, I'm I listen back to it and I'm like, oh, it's very tinny and it's picking up like these specific frequencies, and I'm like, oh, god damn it, every single microphone in the world is designed to pick up the human voice because that's what most people are using them for.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Consumer stuff. Horrible.
consumer stuff.
Although some
Yeah.
microphones are sort of, there's some stuff that I feel has been like, I don't know, there's a lot of interesting microphones that are specifically for like background noise and ambience and things like that. I wonder, sort of, I
Oh,
don't know. in
really?
I mean, in film, in film stuff, we have to, like, there's sort of sound effect microphones, and then there's sort of like really directional stuff, sort of specifically for the human voice, obviously, like this. But there's also like, there's omnidirectional microphones. Maddie's not even listening to me, but oh man. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Let's do some microphone tests on this show. That would be fun.
That
Um,
would be really fun.
so you have 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me about any other fun Renaissance instruments?
Oh, Renaissance instruments, yes. I've been learning a lot about weird instruments lately to sort of see which ones I can pick up and play. Uh, but so so I've been learning because I already played the guitar, so I was like, oh, I'll sort of go back in the lineage of the guitar and see what like absolutely buck wild shit people have come up with. One really cool instrument is not a Renaissance instrument, but an Arabic instrument. It's called an oud. It's sort of the grandfather of all stringed instruments. It's sort of like a very round, fretless lute.
Cool.
But the lute is sort of, yeah, the lute is like Europe's answer to the oud, because they were like, we can't like, they're like, we don't know how to play instruments without frets. Like our musical system, our systems of notation are like not nearly as complex or specific as like Eastern systems of notation, which is another thing I'd love to come back on and talk about because that's wildly fascinating.
That would be
Anyway,
great.
there's this one instrument called the teorbo,
Mhm.
spelled Theorbo, and I encourage you to Google what this instrument looks like because it is like it is it is absurd. It's really
I'm gonna
absurd.
pull it up.
It's sort of like it's sort of like the Carnix horn, that huge horn that's like bigger than a person, but for the lute. So it's like a double bass lute, and it has a huge neck and like a very weird system of tuning, just because it's so large. But it has, similar to like the cello, or the bass or the upright bass, it has a very wide range of stuff that it can play. Like the cello can play like any part in the orchestra, right? It can play the
Yeah.
viola part, it can play the violin part, it can play any part that's higher than it. The teorbo is kind of similar, although it's wicked hard, I would
It's
assume.
huge.
Yeah.
So big. How would you even? I feel like I'm like looking at this. Well, I guess all the. I don't even know. That's crazy.
it's
She's doing it
it's
though. This person in this video is like doing it. Very
oh my
amazing.
god, yeah. And it is so like the absurdity of the teorbo. Even like the name itself is from, it's like a sort of attenuated version of like an Italian nickname for the instrument that was like basically big stupid instrument. And then they were like, that's what it's called. Big stupid.
And then you
Um,
mentioned the oud. We're looking at the oud. What was the other
oh,
one you
the
said?
sorry?
What was the other one you said? I'm just trying to show some pics.
I said, oh, I said the teorbo, the oud, the carnix,
Oh yeah.
which is spelled Carnyx.
Oh. Whoa! Oh my God! It does look like kind of a pig
Yeah, yeah.
mouthpiece
Back when there
looking
were
thing.
wild pigs roaming around in Ireland and
Oh
Scotland.
my God!
I don't remember if the carnix is from Ireland or Scotland. I want to say it's from Ireland, but there was so much sort of osmosis and colonializing back and forth back in the day. Who really can tell?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the flip side of having such absurdly, inconveniently large or complicated instruments is that the sound of the carnix and the sound of the teorbo and the sound of the oud, which is conveniently small but still sort of a weird instrument and very difficult to play well. I think that like these are three of the most beautiful sounds and the most beautiful instruments um, that have been created. Like just because like they're so old,
Mm.
and they're so specific and they're so like highly designed. I think they're really cool. I think we should bring them back.
Yeah. That's a great, yeah, what a great note to end on, truly. I think we should bring these
Yeah.
things back. What's stopping
Yeah.
us? You know, a
What
lot
is
of things, but
Thank you. Mostly the absurd size of all of these.
well, thank you so
um,
much for coming on.
oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm always excited to talk about sound and music. Now,
Yeah.
if I want to tune in after this, where do I go?
Go to twitch.tv/hellispatient.
All right, I will pop up right there directly after this.
All right, you can log out of the Zoom whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. I'll
Thank
see you
you.
around.
See ya.